Hello everyone, and welcome to the Lone Star Audiofest YouTube channel. My name is Wayne Parham. If you're watching this, you probably already know me. I'm the owner and founder of the Lone Star Audiofest. And why I've decided to create this channel is so that we can have a weekly discussion. We can have the people that were at the show talk about what they brought, kind of give some feedback on what they saw and what they experienced. We'll do that since we're starting this thing right after the last show, and then we'll also, as the months go by, we'll start just having updates about the show itself. And then as we come into the fall and spring and getting closer to the next year's show, we'll interview exhibitors that are planning on attending. What I'd like to do to start off with is give you a little bit about the history of Lone Star Audio Fest, and then where we're at now and where we're going. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, we started this thing back when the internet was young. In the beginning, before social media, if you can believe that, there were just a lot of websites on the internet that were kind of like signposts, and those would be little shops that sold like hi-fi kits, tube amp kits, speaker kits, and what I saw is that message boards started forming. You saw them for cars, you saw them for audio. People would just get on there and chat about their favorite hobbies. Those started becoming popular. I had plans. I also have a little loudspeaker company, Pi speakers, and I had those plans online. And what I saw was that a lot of these forums were talking about my speakers. So I decided to join into that, and I started a message board for Pi speakers to support, frankly, at first, this hobby. And then later I started selling kits because I could use an economy of scale to buy the parts cheaper than any individual really could. But what I saw is there was a lot of little companies like mine that had no showroom, no dealer network. They were just selling online. Around the same time, one of the people that was pretty active on my forum was a guy named Mike Baker. And he started a show in Ohio, of all places. I'm Ohio. And he called it the Midwest Audio Fest. And some of the other little companies that were real popular on the forums went there. I loved that. I loved that idea. I went to that show, and he only ran it a couple of years, and he told me it was a lot of work. And I said, well, do you mind if I borrow that idea? Because I think these shows are great for supporting the small kit companies, the small online companies. And I did that. I started the Great Plains Audio Fest. That was the beginnings of the Lone Star Audio Fest, and that was in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And originally, those message boards we had gotten real active. Some people were posting designs of amplifiers and speakers. And people would want to build those things. And so what we would do is we'd make group builds. When someone would design a product, the people interested, we'd all organize a group build, and that then therefore let us have a group purchase. If the amplifier required a special transformer, it was a tube amp that needed a transformer, we could have enough people involved that they would be able to buy those in a quantity. And so, would spread out the cost. And everybody would chat about those. So the beginnings of this audio show supported not only the little companies, but also these hobby efforts and group builds. Another thing that was great was we had seminars. A lot of the people that were involved in those message boards were passionate. They were the ones that were passionate. they may be the leaders of their industry. They may be, some of them were the people that we would reference. If you would write an acoustics paper, you'd reference their work. I mean, there were some heavy hitters. So we'd ask them to come do the seminars, and we put together some really good stuff. Again, that was before social media. So the message boards is how we promoted the Great Plains Audiofest. We moved it to Texas in 2007 because it was just a little bit bigger market. But it's all the Southwest states that we were all together in this thing. A lot of our little hobby clubs from Texas and Oklahoma and Missouri and these areas were participating. So we moved it to Texas. And again, I still promoted this thing to the same group, the companies that don't have a dealer network or a showroom, and that's what the show was for. However, we also, of course, invited the bigger shops, well established. Anybody could come. What we found, though, is a lot of those kind of companies, they do want a bigger, more organized show. So we always had a little difficulty with, how do we promote that? In the days of the message boards, we could promote it pretty well because everybody interested online were there. And the shows really aren't big enough. Even the bigger shows aren't big enough to afford a budget to do television advertisement. And so that was a bit of a quandary. But again, the message boards made it where we could promote that. Probably ever since 2010, we were booming in the 2000s to 2010. But somewhere between 2010 and 2015, I think social media has started to become more and more popular. And I personally don't participate on social media. It's just a thing of mine. I watched some of the message boards, some of the difficulties there. You'd see fake users, sock puppets, shills. I saw some message boards that would actually encourage kind of fighting and bullying because, a fight draws traffic. I didn't like that. My message board, I wouldn't allow that. But I knew that when social media started coming up, we'd have those problems, as well as the problems of when you're mining that data for statistics, some things can happen there. And then as they got bigger, you could see it. There's all that. It's not just fake news about audio anymore. It's fake news about other things. So on a personal level, I don't participate on that, but I do work with others that do. And that's fine. It's not like I think the whole world is evil. I don't do it. I personally am concerned about that. But where that leads us is that the Lone Star Audiofest was getting less and less publicity as those days went on, and I acknowledge that. We all do. A couple of things happened, and they happened at just the right time around COVID, when we all stopped going to the public shows. When we came out of that, and my show, the Lone Star Audiofest, was always the first weekend in May. We moved it to June for a little bit of time, but that didn't work really. So for many, many years, first weekend in May. But I bumped into the same calendar date as T.H.E. In California. And I thought, oops. So I emailed the info line of T.H.E. and Emiko Carlin, who had recently purchased that show and has a history of, she has relationships with the previous owner, so she's plugged into this thing. And she replied, and she said, "Wow, let's chat." And we met and became friends. And so, as many of you may know, we started a somewhat informal partnership in 2025, and we kind of co-hosted that show in 2025 and 2026. She pretty much managed the show, got tickets, took it from really a volunteer effort, which just essentially profited each individual room, each individual company, because it gave them a place to show their equipment, to a show that's more traditional. and that worked pretty well in 2025. And then in 2026, we've grown. We've learned some things that we'd like to change, which is part of what's brought me to doing this channel. I want to be active as well as she, and so that we both are promoting in the ways that we do best. How I see this going forward is Emiko's a musician. She's fantastic, and what she brings to the table, in my opinion. Maybe next week or soon we'll interview her and let you see her too, which you already have, I think. But what she brings to the table is not only is she a musician, but she interacts with some of the hi-fi community. That's the people that I would see be most popular on Stereophile magazine. It's a high-end crowd. They tend to describe their equipment and how it makes you feel and the reactions. And, I've always seen that type of audiophile. They use a lot of adjectives. It's fast, or it's got a lot of presence, or it's dynamic. They use a lot of adjectives. They talk about imaging and things like that. My crowd, the ones that I interact with, are a little more of the techie types. They have a manufacturing company of little kids. They're the ones that'll talk about, clock jitter or vertical nulls. We are a techie bunch, and so we describe measurements a lot of times and what we've seen. I really kind of like both types, and I think I sometimes cross the line. I tend to be way more techie. I will talk about imaging because a lot of my speaker stuff is designed to image well in a difficult room. I won't get all into that, but so I sometimes will talk in those types of adjectives, but I do tend to be more technical and talk about what the measurements are, polars and vertical nulls and stuff. So what I think will probably happen is that Emiko will focus more on the higher end crowd, the stereophile crowd, and I'll focus more on the guys that are designing stuff and maybe the Audio Express crowd. We'll see. But I just wanted to let you know that we are planning to run some interviews on this channel. I'll try to keep it at about a weekly cadence. I will begin by doing exit interviews, talking to the people that were at the 2026 show and getting their experience, talking to them about their equipment, what they brought, getting their feedback, what they felt we did well, what they think that we would like to do better. I would encourage all of you to post and write your comments on what you think so that we know what we're doing right and what we need to change. And then, again, as I said, later in the year, we will begin to bring in who is coming next year and interview them and see what they plan to bring. So this should be a lot of fun, and I hope to see you all again soon. Thanks.